to turn it over to Jim Clifton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is hopefully an interactive session. I don't much care for presentations, so I'm going to either make you interact or feel free to interact. Certainly if you have questions, raise your hand or just blurt it out. If something's not clear that I've said, you want me to repeat it, again, just interrupt me. Very informal. My name is Jim Clifton. I'm the CEO of IN2LEX Medical. It's a UK startup in medical device. We've been in business for about a year. My background, I'm a Kentucky native. Graduated from Henry Clay High School, went away to college, and stayed away for a fairly long time. Did a stint in banking. You'll see that influence in this presentation and kind of the way I think. I got into manufacturing. I spent some time in a third shift management role with the Vampires, in a manufacturing role at Nortel and RTP, Research Triangle Park. I call them Vampires because there is a whole culture of people who do live and love the third shift. It's an experience that I would suggest if you're in that realm, do it, but don't do it long. After that, I went to business school at Vanderbilt. Excuse me, before that I went to business school at Vanderbilt. And spent a lot of time, at that time, total quality was a big deal, TQM, Deming. I spent a lot of time on the cost side of accounting. My friends kid me and think that I should be a CPA, and I have probably enough hours to get it if I wanted it. And that's how I got into manufacturing, actually. And somewhere along the way, Bell Northern Research, which is the AT&T labs of Nortel, I saw the internet, literally saw it for the first time. A guy brought up a browser, started clicking these links, and it took me less than 5 minutes to figure out that I had to change my job immediately at that point, because this was a complete game changer. I went through a process of trying to find a small software company to go to work for. Strangely enough, a friend of mine got a call from a headhunter with a position in a company called DataBeam in Lexington, Kentucky. He called me and said, "What do you know about these guys?" And I knew nothing about them. This part of the story, which is kind of ironic, is that I called the Chamber of Commerce and learned nothing from them about that. So I made some calls, got him some information. He turned down the job, and I ultimately took that job and helped them launch a series of internet-based products. We took their big, huge data sharing stacks and moved them to servers and sold them to the Fortune 500. And at the time, if you guys are familiar with WebEx and NetMeeting, and that's all DataBeam technology under the covers. And extremely successful, 50 or 60 very, very intelligent engineers. They're still here. That company was sold to Lotus, IBM. I spent a little time with that company and then ultimately went through the dot-com bonanza. 3 different companies by way of Delta Airlines in Atlanta. That's where I really sort of figured out this is the place I wanted to be in terms of if I'm going to practice the art of business, I want to do it down here in the startup realm. And I want to do it over and over and over again. It's simply the most creative, most fun, most dynamic, scariest part of business that I've seen. And I was in banking for a while. I've seen the Fortune 100. There's a place in everybody's heart for that, but not mine. Why am I here? Part of what I love to do, and Randall, we started these discussions a while back. I read a lot about this stuff. I study it. I enjoy it. I constantly want to learn new things about starting companies. I think there is a science to it. There's a big portion of this that's an art, but I think you can reduce some of it to a science and learn from that process. And what I'm going to introduce to you all tonight, in my opinion, is probably a major advancement. I don't know if I want to go that far on a limb. One of the things that flavors, my career is product management. I'm probably in my heart a product manager and will always be a product manager. If you understand what that means in a technology company, it means you stand between the customer and engineering and you help develop the spec and the customer requirements and bring that back into the engineering world and then help them build that. So you got arrows on both the front and the back of you, and you're not pleasing anybody. And you'll see one of the things that's at the core of product management, in my opinion, is the business model and understanding of that. But I'm here really because one of my interests is to develop a language, a common language. I think one of the things we suffer in Lexington, and I think it's really to varying degrees in all markets, is a common language for startups. I've been on both sides of the table in terms of starting companies and raising money. I've also been on the other side, funding companies, looking at business plans, trying to understand and assess risk, what risk mitigation is. And one of the things I see between entrepreneurs and investors is this lack of a common language. You can be in the room, you can talk at each other, but until you have a common language, a common basis for understanding, you don't come to an understanding, common vision of what is possible. So I'm here as sort of just one of my passions is to share what I think is an incredibly interesting model, framework. If you learn anything about me is I really believe in sort of frameworks and using frameworks as tools. Then I'd ask, why are you here? How many people are from Kentucky in this room tonight? How many are Lexingtonians? How many people moved to Lexington to start a business?
Farm.
Two. That's two more than I would have bet. I should have. This is Paul Sullivan, by the way. He's speaking next month, and you can talk to him later. And did actually move to Lexington to start a business. But my question is, why are you here? How many folks are interested in startups or starting a company? Pretty much what we thought. What I want to talk about is I think that Randall talked about it I think 2 months ago, this notion of the lean startup, and Steve Blank and a whole group of disciples that have gone into lean startup investment and lean startup methodology, marketing, development. There is a revolution, I think, going on today. And I think the venture capital business is going to be dramatically changed for two reasons. One, I would say their performance in the last decade has been an abysmal failure. And so the great good old days of venture capital are over. And so there's a vacuum that exists that they need a new model for investment. And that's going on. I'm going to be using a book called Business Model Generation. It is one of many that puts forth a very interesting framework, and it's one that I happen to like. That's my opinion. I think there are many good frameworks for business development. This is my slide for frameworks. You'll hear me say this over and over again. These are the things that we build our ideas and notions around. And consistent use of a framework helps in consistently communicating what you're after. I just found this image just preparing for this in a Googled, I don't know what I Googled, but this came up. You'll hear Steve Blank talk about get out of the building. And that's a core theme to what's the difference between a business model and a business plan. But the most interesting thing to me is get out of the building is that little bitty arrow. See, I think right there. It's the only place it happens. So we can talk about data, information, knowledge. We can talk about frameworks until we're blue in the face. But until you get out of the building, none of it matters. So I think one of the things that I'll preach on or preach, one of my principles is it's great to have frameworks. It's great to think long and hard hours and put time and effort in. But until you engage that customer and determine what they want or test what you're offering, none of this even matters. I'll talk about that in a minute. But rhetorical question maybe, are they dead? The yeses would say they take way too long, the cycle, things are moving so fast, I've got to make payroll, I got to make sales, I got all this other stuff going on, I don't have time to write one. That's legitimate. Nobody reads them. You'll hear that a lot. How many people have written big, long, extensive, exhaustive business plans? How many have written more than 5? How many have read more than 10, 50, 100? They just sit there. So you put all this time and effort into them, and they go on. You know, it's like that corporate strategy document that sits on the shelf. And you know, I worked at Nortel. We just had beautiful things prepared by consultants, millions of dollars. And some people just hate to write, right? It's not in their gene, genetics. It's entrepreneurs are sort of nervous and you know, I can't stand still. You just can't sit down to write the 30-page paper. Well, the nose would say something different. And here comes the haymakers, right? It just keeps coming back to that. Investors require them, and I need the money. So now I'm forced into sort of a quandary. Do I sit down and write a business plan because I need money? Or do I try to do something different? Is this myth? Is this reality? How many people have been told you have to have a business plan to raise money? So I would argue you do need a business plan, but it's not the business plan that looks like that. Despite the fact that I love that, by the way. This just gets me all excited. I put that up there to be representative of the hassle and the heaviness and the technical side of business planning. And it's true, right? These are extensive, and actually this comes from a software you can buy. How many people have written a plan based on some software template? Anybody? Yeah? I think Wes, is this yours, Wes? Did you tweet this out? I loved it, immediately copied it. That's our, you know, that's the other side of the business plan, you know? I want to just make some money and be happy, right? Don't you understand I need $5 million to do that? So, well, what's between that? I mean, what's useful in here? Some big things that have really changed, and we'll go through a case that exemplifies a couple of these, is speed, notion of learning, the notion that customer-driven. One of the things that's just blown my mind, having spent the better part of 2 decades in the software business, is how cheap it is to start a software company. It is unbelievable the things you can do with $10,000. It costs $100, $200, $500,000, $1 million. Randall, what's the new saying? 500,000 is the new 5 million, right? And that's probably true. You can get so much further on so few dollars, fewer dollars. Competition is, you know, read whatever you want to read. The flat Earth, the Earth is flat, I think is what it's called. And it's true. The sun really never goes down. Your competitors are constantly in the business. They're constantly thinking of new things. And we talked about the lower barriers to entry.